Before we start, I'd like to mention that some of the language in all of our episodes may be interpreted as offensive. If you are easily offended, I would advise you to go and listen to another podcast. However, if you don't mind the occasional swear word or bad story, you're in for a treat. Enjoy the rest of the podcast. Welcome to the second episode of the Average Person podcast. Today I'm joined by someone that I met at the start of my journey as a professional soccer coach. He's someone I feel that if we lived closer together or if he stayed in America a bit longer, we would be very good friends. Not that we aren't now, but with us both living busy lives and quite far apart, it can be difficult to socialise and speak regularly. James is someone that takes his craft seriously, which I think made us click in America, taking his job serious and what we do. And above all, he has a great sense of humour. I think he fancied himself as the best FIFA player around before coming to America, before I showed him a lesson or two while we were out there. So many great memories we had together living in a house of 4 to 5 lads, and next door another 3 to 4 lads that all love playing FIFA and football in general. So some great memories to look back on. James, would you like to just introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you first for your kind words, James. It's always nice to hear some good compliments about myself, particularly when it comes to FIFA as well. But I think you've said some things that can be misconstrued there about my FIFA ability. But yeah, so my name's James Fulker. I'm 29 years old, so obviously the right side of 30. Currently working 3 jobs at the moment, which is always good to be busy, especially during difficult times for everyone. So currently working in IT recruitment, currently doing delivery driving for a national supermarket. Recently just joined the British Army as well. So hopefully looking to start as an intelligence soldier within the next month or so, depending on everything that's going on with COVID. So keeping busy in difficult times. So all good.
It sounds like you're juggling a lot of things at the same time. Then your schedule must be pretty packed.
Juggling now 70-hour weeks or so. When you consider what you'd normally be doing in your spare time, like playing football or soccer and catching up with friends, it isn't too bad as long as you get your rest in and what have you. It's probably a good time more than ever now to picking up new hobbies, working as much as you can and saving money. So when we come out of this, we can, get back to what we were doing beforehand and being a better version of ourselves, really.
Yeah, well, it's nice to hear that you've taken up new opportunities and you've changed your schedule for the better, because I know a lot of people, and it's easily done, during lockdowns and people on furlough of work, you kind of take up a lazy perspective on life, just watching TV and waiting for things to go back to normal. And sometimes you think, oh, that's okay. I think during the first lockdown, everyone kind of had that aspect of, 4 weeks off, just, watch Netflix, every show on there. But then time goes on and on and on, and the second lockdown and a third lockdown. And I think if you were just to sit there and carry on repeating the same things, that's where, mental health things come up. So it's good.
Definitely.
We'll start to talk on those things later on about your current jobs. But I think the first time I think I met you without even realizing was at our interviews for trying to go out to America as coaches. I remember becoming quite good friends with someone at the interview, which is obviously a Charlie that we both know. But yeah. I couldn't remember really anyone else at the interview. I only really know him because of having conversations with him, and I think we exchanged WhatsApp numbers just to have someone in contact with in the process, because we were both adamant that we were going to be going out there if we got the opportunity to. And then without knowing, you were there as well. And then our first role obviously being a soccer coach there. But if we go even further back then, I just wanted to get a little bit of background on, you growing up before working. So maybe it was before 16 or whether you had jobs before that, and the kind of the lessons that your parents instilled in you growing up.
It's a good question, really. I mean, I've always been quite fond of being in education and trying to learn as much as possible. So obviously after finishing high school, I then went and done my A-levels. At that time, I wasn't really working at all. I was playing a lot of football and made a little bit of money off that, but only ever pocket money, really. So I never really had the time to juggle a part-time job alongside it. It was only when I went to college, probably a year or two after my A-levels, that I really started working. To be honest, I found it quite hard to get into work. I don't know how you found it, but every job I interviewed for was a no, you've got no experience. But, at 17, 18 years old, it's a bit hard to accumulate experience when you haven't really been given that first opportunity. And as young teenagers or young adults, you need someone to give you that foot in the door to really kick off your career. the first person that ever done that for me was a guy called Tim. So my first ever job was at Pizza Hut part-time, just as kitchen staff. That really gave me like a good experience, and in terms of working alongside different colleagues and being in a working environment where you're put under different pressures. And I'll forever be grateful for someone for actually giving me that first chance. So that job was with Pizza Hut, as you can imagine, was just food preparation and cleaning duties and what have you, but you know, a good experience nonetheless, and that helped me then go forward into other jobs and take invaluable skills that I probably wouldn't have had otherwise. So
at that age, I mean, could only really go off advice from my parents and what other people did. You know, the advice I got a lot was, you know, print off 40 CVs and go around town handing them out into shops asking for vacancies and things. And obviously no one got back to me. I mean, some people might have had luck in that regard, but I always found that it ended up for me, and that's just a personal kind of thing for me, is that every job I had up to, you know, going to America is from people that I knew. So my friend, his parents owned a restaurant, and then they managed to employ me and my best friend and a couple other friends, and that's how I got my foot into the doorway in regards to getting my first job. So with your job at Pizza Hut, how did you manage to get your first job? Was it someone you knew, or was it just applying online?
Applying more so than anything. I think a valuable lesson anyone can learn is if you get a no, even if it's 99 times, you only need that one chance out of 100 to get a yes. Although I've relied on my personal network a lot over my working career, this first chance was more about my own personal endeavour more than it was having to rely on someone.
Did you find yourself overindulging when you were at Pizza Hut?
Oh God, yeah. That was the highlight of the job, to be honest. And there was no sort of limit on what you couldn't take home. As long as they had it in stock, they needed to get rid of it. So after every shift, I'd be like in the kitchen, like making cookie dough and God, taking pizzas home. But I was lucky I was playing football, because I would have, I don't know, it would have gone wrong for me. Let's put it that way.
It's very difficult to reject free food. Every shift, you at the start of the shift, you're probably telling yourself, right, tonight I'm not going home if anything. And as the shift goes on, you get hungrier and hungrier, and it gets to the end and you think, maybe if I just take a medium one home tonight rather than a large.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even if you don't fancy, you're like, do you know what? I can have that for lunch tomorrow or something like that. And as a student, you're like, you're not earning too much money. You're like, yeah, if I take a pizza home tonight, I won't spend that £5 tomorrow on my lunch or whatever.
In hindsight, now it's quite bad for your health when you think about how a lot of people are put under a strain where they prioritize how much something costs as opposed to the negative effects on their health, you know. So you save yourself a fiver, but you're eating a pizza with no kind of nutrients or anything for your body, which is not good for you, and you're putting on weight and all of those things that come with it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think I'm only now, as I get older, I'm getting a bit wiser that like, I think you have to invest in your health more. So why would you not pay the extra £1 or £2 for something that's more healthy or more nutritious, rather than spending, like, you know, trying to save yourself a little bit of money but putting rubbish into your body.
After you've been at Pizza Hut, then the next job that I see is you went to Direct Line. So did you want to just touch on what was involved working for Direct Line?
Because I finished college and I was only working at Pizza Hut part-time, I was looking to get into full-time work, and that can often be quite troublesome because, like I said, the experiences you can get from any job are brilliant, but I was trying to get into office work. So if you're working in a restaurant setting, you know, some of them skills aren't always translatable to an office environment. So that was tough. So I started. Direct Line was formerly known as RBS Insurance. So they own both brands, Churchill and Direct Line. They're two huge brands, car insurance amongst a variety of other services. That was call centre work, and that was pretty brutal, to be honest. It's one of them jobs you put the phone down and it rings again. There's no respite. There's no, 5 minutes just to put your feet up or speak to a colleague or, do other admin tasks you have to do. It's phone down, customers ringing again. And it's all inbound calls calling for new quotations on car insurance. And again, like it's a brutal job, but you gain so many skills from work like that. As much as I'll sit here and say, like, the environment's really tough, and you do still learn quite a lot. And I remember at 19 years old, I went in there sort of fresh faced, not knowing what to expect, no background or experience in that line of work, and I ended up being one of the best salesman on my floor. I had the highest rap time, which means highest time spent off the phone. I managed to do quite well in terms of sales as well. I then went to go to university after that, so that was what cut my tenure short there. Yeah.
It's interesting when you think of things in the bigger picture. So, for example, you've got the Pizza Hut thing where you're gaining skills from that, but with the direct line, I'm sure you're having to like multitask and be very quick with what you say, kind of refining the words that you say in a call to make it shorter and more to the point, and also listening to different people. Because I always think that sometimes I go to a phone shop. It's a good example. I'll go into O2 and I'll be stuck behind an older person that doesn't know how to work the phone. And the issue could be something so simple like wanting to move their contacts from their SIM to their device. They just can't explain it. They cannot explain what they want. And I'm stuck behind 15 minutes. And what's annoying me more is the O2 employee can't just say to them, oh, this is what you want. I'll do that for you right now. And it's a 2-minute thing. Even the O2 employee is struggling to kind of put her words into action and doing something about it. And I think to myself, can you not just explain to her that? So I'm just thinking with the direct line thing, when someone rings up about a quotation, you might know straight away what they're trying to say, but they're going the long way around it. And your ability to take that information on and kind of sift through it to get to the point, I'm sure that was a skill that you gain in that job.
Yeah, I mean, you've highlighted a key point there. Communication is one of the most important skills in any job that you can ever have. If you don't articulate what you want or what you need, you're not going to ever find the right answers. But you'll find in a lot of these big corporate companies, the likes of Direct Line and Churchill, they'll give you a script in which you need to follow. So you're almost, when you go in there as like a fresh face sort of 18, 19-year-old, you're given this script of what to read to customers, and that they can immediately tell you're just reading word for word verbatim of what's on this piece of paper, and it doesn't really give you a chance to put across your personality in a call.
Well, you've gone from your first job not really having much communication with customers, only just making the pizzas really, and then you've got one where the conversation is restricted to what they want you to talk about and what the customer's calling you about. You've got no kind of movement in where the conversation goes, and you said there's lack of personality being able to shown on a call. But your next job, being a bartender, surely that was your first opportunity where you can actually have chit chat with people, maybe small talk about how much Ipswich are struggling and things like that, kind of as a bartender. What was that like?
So yeah, that bartender job was, I'd done that alongside studying for my bachelor's degree. So that was in Surrey. That was behind a bar at a hockey club. You hit the nail on the head. You get a lot of different personalities in there, and as you can imagine, working in an area like Surrey, there's a lot of wealthy people as well. So some interesting stories behind there. We had a lot of ex-professional footballers whose kids weren't there. Played hockey at the club, so we had the likes of, I don't know if you can remember, like George Boateng, Mark Schwarzer, some wild times working there. Not me particularly, but some of the parties they used to throw there. And I've gone from what you said, like I've been in a call centre speaking to people on the phone, but then going to work behind a bar is a different kettle of fish.
Sounds like you had quite a bit of freedom then in comparison to your previous job.
Yeah, and when things go wrong, I mean, obviously you'd like a shoulder's crying or someone to ask, but if you're there by yourself, you're having to figure things out yourself and learn whilst on the job.
It's a little bit off topic, but I remember when I first went to South Africa, and there were with a charity, and the leader of the charity is a guy called Joe Sargison, and some people listening to this will know who he is, and he had this famous saying which was "deal with it." And it was infuriating at times when he would say that. So I remember the first time I experienced it was when we all went over there, we were told that we had to take over 5 footballs in our suitcases. Like every single person that traveled had to take 5 footballs. And we get there and we have a meeting, and he says, with your 5 footballs, what I'd like you to do is go after this meeting, go and put them in my bedroom. So I was like, okay. So we go to take the footballs to the bedroom, and his bedroom door's locked. We think, well, what do we do now? Like, we don't know what to do. He said, put them in the bedroom, and we can't. We don't want to leave them in the hallway. So we go back to him and we say, Joe, your bedroom door's locked. What do you want us to do? And he says, deal with it.
And so it's no kind of advice or help or anything. It's just deal with it. And he would just drop that all the time. Deal with it. And you just find ways to learn and work things out for yourself. And after you complete the task, you're so glad that he said deal with it, because you don't evolve or develop in any way if he just tells you what to do. So it sounds a little bit like when you work on your own. So say you're at that bar and you don't know how something works. If you try and work it out for yourself, you'll never forget that skill. You'll never forget how that is. But if you ask someone all the time how to do something and they tell you, then you're kind of relying on them all the time.
Yeah. And like you say, it's when you're in the moment, it's aggravating. These people are telling you to deal with it, and you're like, well, you want to say, well, help me, like that. You're almost crying out for help in that instance. But I think it's only after you have that feeling of self-satisfaction, like I figured that all out by myself. I didn't need that person to help me. I can just do it. Quite often, you shouldn't be afraid of the failure. If things don't work out in that one circumstance, then so be it. Everyone fails, but you need to learn from the failure, even if you get it wrong. And it's good to figure things out for yourself sometimes. So
one of my kind of favorite attributes that I have for myself, and I don't even know how I got it, or I couldn't even advise someone on how to obtain the skill, but I actually really love making mistakes when I'm working, whether it's coaching or delivering food or whatever it is. I love making mistakes, because if I'm constantly going for months without making a mistake or doing anything, I feel like I'm just stuck. I'm not really evolving. If I make a mistake, it means I'm trying to do something differently. I think making mistakes is something that people shouldn't really be scared of. I might make a small mistake, and it's kind of like a little pinch to make myself realize that like I'm trying to get better at the job. What's made you want to kind of get up and leave and go to America, and what did you do when you were there?
For the third year of my bachelor's degree, I've done a study exchange. So studied abroad at a university in Michigan called Grand Valley State University. I was there for the best part of 10 months, and lucky for me, it didn't count towards my degree. So I picked up a lot of business related subjects which were relevant to my degree here in the UK. But when I was told the news that it didn't count towards my grade here, I started picking up different subjects. So I swapped bank management, and I done bowling, Pilates and yoga. And I was like the mockery of all the classes for like yoga and Pilates, because my flexibility is embarrassing. Like if you told me to straighten my legs, I'd feel like my hamstring was going to snap in half.
What was the motives behind the yoga?
Just it was a one credit class, and like I just thought to myself, would I rather be stuck in a bank management class, pulling my hair out and not knowing what on earth this lecturer is talking about, or would I rather be in a in a room trying to like stretch and meditate? I thought it's a no-brainer for me. So I had a few lessons a week. A lot of the time you get to yourself, you can go out and travel and see different places. I played for the soccer team at Grand Valley State, scored a few goals as well, believe it or not. Usually a defender, but out there played centre mid. We went to the finals in Indianapolis. The overall experience is what sort of made me want to go back out there. So after I finished my studies in London, I went back out and done Camp America for 6 months. That experience was honestly unbelievable. You get put into an environment where there's no real signal out there, so you take your phone out, you can't really talk to anyone. I remember there being sort of one certain spot on this whole site where you could pick up like one bar of signal. So obviously there you go and you have some free time to speak to your family back in the UK. But other than that, you don't go on your phone for like weeks on end. And, it was an unbelievable opportunity just to disconnect from the world. After I finished my bachelor's, I couldn't think of anything worse than going back into education. I've just studied for 4 years. I'm like sick of the sight of like a lecture hall, picking up a pen.
You've been to Camp America, and that's obviously more of a friendly environment. It's kind of children going away for the summer and having fun the whole time. There's they want to gain skills and things, but there's no kind of emphasis on making sure that they're developing and things like that. It's more just having fun. Is that right?
It depends where you go. All the camps in America are slightly different. So this is a leadership camp. So there was an emphasis in this camp of trying to develop kids into leaders and I guess kind of putting them out of their comfort zone.
Between returning and then picking your next role, away from England, which was where we met, was you working at Tesco. So when you were working at Tesco, is that you as a delivery driver or just a regular in-store employee?
That Tesco job was as an in-store employee. A lot of that was, stacking shelves and just restocking essentially. I'm one of these people that I love variety. You can probably tell from having like countless number of jobs in 10 years. It's not a good thing. I'm not advocating sort of switching jobs every year or two, but what I like is variety. I like to travel. I like to see different places. And for me, that job was, walking to like the freezers out back, walking to the stock room, bringing the stock out, putting it on the shelves. And, there's not a lot of variety in jobs like that.
I mean, I think some people, because I was trying to understand people's perspective and why, but some people do that job and they think, "Oh, I'm not bad at it. I can do this job," so they keep on doing it, and then they know exactly how much money they're going to earn each month, so then they plan their life around that, and they kind of plan their schedule around that. And I think that's how people get stuck doing those jobs for 40 years. Everyone needs people like that. During this pandemic, everyone's talk about key workers and how amazing the NHS have been, and obviously they have been outstanding, but people who work at supermarkets, I mean, they almost as highly exposed to the virus as everybody else. Supermarkets are so overcrowded, and I think that as time's gone on, I remember one-way systems, and I remember only certain amount of people in the store at a time, and now it's almost like a frenzy of people in the store, and the lines are so long. I mean, I went into a supermarket recently, and the checkout aisle, you have like 20 odd aisles with the staff working on, they were like backed up, so there was like 2 or 3 people waiting on each of those aisles. So you imagine like the kind of corridor of being able to walk from the end of the store all the way along to the self-checkout was scattered with people in the way. And I'm thinking, this cannot be a good thing. And it's almost like they've gone away with all the kind of safety and the regulations that they first had when we first had the initial lockdown.
I thought that exact same thing yesterday. So I walked out of a supermarket yesterday and there was a huge queue outside the door, like going around the corner, but in store was ridiculous. Like it was, you were walking past someone and there was no, it's impossible to keep 2 meters at times. And you think like, if there's ever been a breeding ground for a virus out there, then this is it. Like, it's unavoidable in places like that, especially indoors. Yeah, like you said, I take my hat off to people that do that job. It's especially in times like this.
So we go to now the time where we first met each other. So we had an interview, and at the interview you did a kind of practical session outside with some children, and you were assessed by the owner of the company. It was Stone Soccer at the time, and then we went on to being bought out by ATSC, and we both got offered the opportunity to go out there. And I remember, I don't know if it was because of availability, but me and a boy called Charlie went out there. I think it was the start of March, and then I think you joined us a few weeks after. Can you remember that period quite well?
I remember it like it was yesterday, because it was such a bizarre moment in my life. I remember, I can't remember what you remember of it, but initially before traveling out there, but it all kind of, I thought it was coming to a halt, like we wouldn't be able to go, like we just interviewed and got accepted and I was excited about going, and then there was like a big like thing about not being able to potentially go. So I remember like getting on that plane, not really knowing what to expect. And before that I'd done some soccer coaching, football coaching, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't like I'd ever been exposed to that sort of environment or job before. But yeah, I remember going up to the interview in Leicester, my dad driving me up and not really knowing what to expect, and put on a session, and then within weeks got the like acceptance. And then I remember first walking into the room and seeing you and Charlie in there, and yeah, it seemed like it was yesterday, and all went from there really. I remember we got all our cars and stuff from Enterprise. You had the best car. I remember I was always jealous that you had a Mini, didn't you? And I think I had an old Chevrolet. I remember Charlie always used to try and steal it off you as well, I think.
The car thing was quite funny actually, because I remember when me and Charlie first got there, and I think it was the first day, they said, oh no, it was the next day. We arrived at night, we were picked up by another coach, Ian, he took us to the house. And then the next day they were like, go to Enterprise for your car. So we both went down there with the anticipation of both receiving a car. And me and Charlie were like, we get told that there's only one car and one of you would have it now and then the other person would get theirs later on. So me and Charlie are going down to the Enterprise together and we're like thinking, oh no, it's like a bit awkward because we'd only just met each other properly as well. It's like who gets the car? So I think we did rock, paper, scissors or something. I don't know how we did it. Whether or Charlie might have just said, you can have it. I can't remember what it was. And anyway, I ended up getting the first car. At Enterprise, it's kind of such a lottery, isn't it? You get there and they say, well, all we have in right now is this. And you get there and it's the most random car. And the first car I initially got was a Nissan Versa. And people won't even know what that car is, but it's not a nice car. Let me tell you that. It's not a nice car. I remember I had a granddad armrest in there and everything. And, but I was happy with the car. I was just happy to have a car. So we're driving around in that. And then 2 or 3 days later, Charlie gets an email saying, I got an email saying, can you please take Charlie to Enterprise to pick up his car? So I'm driving down there, rubbing my hands together, laughing, thinking he's going to get screwed even worse than me. Let's see what car he gets. And we get down there and there's this bright orange Mini Cooper there, along with a bunch of other cars. And he's like looking at me. You know what he's like? He's like, no, please, no. Look, jammy little thing he is. And we get in there and he gets given this bright orange Mini Cooper and he drives that around for the entirety of the rest of that season. And then with my car, something I remember, Joe Green, he borrowed it in New York one day. And I think he's crashed it or bumped into someone, or the wing mirror came off or something. And when he had to borrow my car, and I say my car, and I had to take it back to Enterprise, and then they ended up giving me this Hyundai something, another small car, but it was better than the Nissan. And then Luke Adams borrowed that car. Every time it was borrowed, it was mistreated and broke. He T-boned someone and wrote the car off, I think. And then I had to go to Enterprise again. And at this point, I think I was on name terms with the employees at the branch. And it was like, which car do I get this time? And they gave me a white Mini Cooper. And one of our bosses said, you will not be sharing cars anymore, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wow, I've actually got this white Mini Cooper for the next 2 or 3 months. And yeah, it was great having that car.
That's so funny. I remember sitting in that, like the foyer bit at Enterprise, and you were waiting for the person who worked in the store to walk out to the car, and you saw the cars lined up in the car park, and you're like, please walk to that one, please walk to that one. Then he walks past it and then pulls out the most hideous car. I remember all the cars we got second time around that were all geared as well, like stick shift or what do they call it in America. And obviously it's weird for us driving on the other side and the wheel being on the other side and changing gears with your right hand. And I had the tiniest little car driving over that Verrazano Bridge in Brooklyn, which is unbelievably narrow. And I was just like, people behind me, like, bibbing, but I was just like, my whole like distance was off. Like, I didn't know how close I was to the middle line driving on the other side. It was so bizarre, but yeah, it's funny.
I remember when we returned again, we had those Yaris's. There was like Yaris's given out, all different colours, and we were all driving them around like they were mini, like minis on the Italian job. And we would go to play five-a-side football. We would go to play five-a-side football, and then we'd have like a mini race between ourselves to get back down the highway, all in these manual Yaris's. It was brilliant.
Yeah, I remember that like it was yesterday. Just before as well, I had such a nice car. I don't know if that was a Chevy as well, but I don't know if you can remember it. And it was one of them automatic ones, and you twist it in the middle inside the car to go into park, drive, and reverse. But that was an unbelievable car, and I went from that to that Yaris, and I was just like, oh my god, this is awful.
Yeah, some downgrade.
Yeah.
A strong memory that I have with you is I remember when we were assigned to the worst work in the world, which was the Long Island wreck. So we would have to leave the house at like 7 or 6:30 a.m. to drive 2.5 hours to Long Island for it to be pouring down with rain, and praying that it would be cancelled, where we were working with the little guys. They were like 3 or 4 years old, but half of them didn't want to be there, and the parents were quite rude, and the person that ran the program was quite rude, and no one really wanted to be there. But we kind of did it because, you know, the afternoons we normally have off afterwards. You know, we'd work till 1 o'clock and we'd have the afternoon off, and we were in Long Island, so we could easily go to New York. You know, we went to the Hamptons a couple times. We went into New York a couple times, and one of them, I remember you talking about wanting to go to a Conor McGregor fight, and the agreement we made, I think I might have got this story wrong, but what I can remember is that, you know, we agreed that you drove us there, and then I would drive you into New York, drop you off for this Conor McGregor fight, and then I would drive home. And I remember, you know, we were so tired. I think we got like coffee or whatever, and we're driving to Long Island, and we're going down this downhill part, and you were driving, and you got caught by a police officer, and the cops pulled us over, and then we got like a $90 or $100 ticket, and that was before the wreck. It was an expensive day as it is, you know, you're going into the city. And then I agreed to drive you into the city. So normally it takes probably 2 hours from Long Island, but because Conor McGregor was fighting that day, who was he fighting? Who was it?
Alvarez.
It was a huge fight at the time. I remember the whole city was almost locked down, and it took like 3.5 hours even just to get into New York, Manhattan. And then I dropped you off. I think it was like not exactly where you wanted because it was taking so long. And then it took me a further 4.5 hours to get home. And I think it was like 7.5 hours where I hadn't stepped out of the car. And I was like, why did I agree to this hell? What a horrible day it was. I think it was like 6 o'clock at night. My whole day had been gone because of it. But that's New York traffic for you.
Yeah, sorry about that, mate. But I remember that clearly. I've never had a speeding ticket here in the UK, and that one morning I remember we'd just gone over was it George Washington Bridge, I think, and it was like 50, and I'd obviously just, you know, I think I was only going like 60 or 70, and then he slapped me with $100 fine, and that I never actually heard any more about it because I hadn't paid it. I was always afraid about not being let back in.
Yeah,
to
when
America.
you enter the country, they say no, you got a warrant for your arrest.
Yeah, no, I thought that you were trying to evade like a speeding ticket, but I'd actually actively tried to pay it before I left, and they were like, "Well, we've got no recollection of it. We don't even know it exists." So I was like, "Oh, happy days!" Like,
what did you enjoy about that job coaching in America most, and what did you hate about it? Well, let's say dislike the most.
I'd actually say it's probably the best job, or most certainly top 2 or 3 jobs I've ever had, purely because, you know, you're so close to Manhattan. I loved the area in which we lived. Living with your mates is, you know, there's a lot of pros and a lot of cons, but it's mostly good. And it's just the lifestyle. Like, I think we were probably coaching maybe 6 hours a day tops at times. I didn't enjoy them drives to Long Island, what you mentioned, and a lot of the kids were quite difficult to manage. They'd run off everywhere, and you know them sessions where you're coaching really young kids and they're running here, there, and everywhere, and you're worried about like the parents looking in and thinking this coach can't get control of these kids, and I'm stood there like not panicking, but like it's just like, what can you do? And you have to revert back to an old session you've done where, you know, it's like captivated their attention. The flexibility and the lifestyle were brilliant, and just living in an area where you can go and see some cool sites. We went down to, well, I think me, Charlie, and Ryan went down to Washington as well. I don't think we were strictly allowed to go down that far, but we done it anyway for the day. And then the cons, really, I'd probably have liked to have just focused on my teams a lot more. I had 4 really good teams at the time at Morris United and at Yoa, and I was really starting to notice a lot of development, which is for a coach, that's one of the most satisfying things you can have. I'm sure you'll probably agree. You're asked to go out and do all these other sessions, like rec sessions at different clubs, and you know they're good, but you want to put your sole attention into the teams you've got.
It's a lot of times I thought to myself, I wish I was just hired for, you know, the actual coaching of my teams and game day, because that's where you're really going to see development, and then you get sometimes shafted with work that you really don't want to do, and you think to yourself, oh, I really can't be bothered to do this. But then when you get there, you think, well, these 3 or 4 year old kids, they deserve the best version of myself, and I need to give them that. And it's unfair for me not give them my best because I don't want to be doing this. But a lot of the times I wish that the company recruited people specifically to do that work, and we were to be focused elsewhere. You know, the longer I stay in America for, the more I realize, and there's only 10% of the people that out clubs and stuff out there, you know, they're development focused, and there's people listening to this that might get offended by that, but it's just the harsh reality. And the other, you know, 90% is just, we have to make a quota of how much money we make, and this is the turnover and stuff like that. And, you know, if we're talking about, I think the best example really is that, I mean, I had a 9-a-side team and I wanted to have a roster of 14, which I thought 5 subs, you know, that's a lot of subs. And they're trying to shove me with 17, 18 players. And it's just doesn't make sense, you know, anywhere in Europe, anywhere. I would like to say anywhere, you know, it's just ridiculous numbers, and they're just probably eyes lighting up thinking we can make X amount of money out of this team. And my argument for so long was, how long are they playing, the training sessions, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, money wins in the end almost all the time. So it's great to get the development under the conditions you put under.
It's like, it's one of them things, like it's almost like a moral dilemma for them. On the one hand, you obviously want to improve these kids to give parents and the kids like value for money, but ultimately, like you're kind of, by what you said there, having 18 people in a squad, you're jeopardizing their chances to improve. Like, why not potentially do another team and, you know, give them more playing time, because 18 obviously doesn't go into 9, so the time in which they're playing is minimal. They'll have training sessions, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the time you learn when you're playing football or in a soccer game, you learn from being on the pitch. So yeah, it's a bit of it's probably one of the worst things about it from my perspective, and probably from yours as well, of course.
So after we were in America with ATSC, it was a difficult time for me in my second year of going back, because I was having literally the best time of my life when I was in the house with, you know, one of my best friends, Ryan, came out with you, Charlie, Luke, another guy called Luke, Ian. The kind of chemistry and atmosphere and environment that we had created was just amazing. You know, playing FIFA, Football Manager, going out for food together, playing football together. There was just so many things that we had in common, and it was just a brilliant time of my life. And all of you pretty much had said that you're not going to be returning, and that made it very difficult for me, because I was kind of like, I'm in a crossroads now where my closest friends and my best friends that I made when I was out there are now not going back. And it's a dream of mine to keep going, but it was difficult. Like, I find it difficult in myself to make new friends. I'm not the loudest person in the room, and unless I've got something to say to you, I'm not just going to really make up small talk. And it was difficult. So going back in the second year and you not going back in the second year, we obviously had different circumstances. So what was your kind of circumstances in not going back and then kind of venturing on to something else?
Yeah, I just remember being out there that whole second part of the year, and I just remember this is when Trump was coming into power, and there was just this whole thing going around that visa's going to be ridiculously hard to come by, and the company might have to make cuts, and you won't be able to get back on the visa that you want to come back out. And in hindsight, I'd always wished I'd gone back out that following year and done it again, because like I said earlier, that is one of the best roles or jobs that I've ever had, and I wouldn't even call it a job because it was something that I enjoyed doing. At that point, I just felt like I had to return to the UK, and then I had to like utilize my bachelor's degree that I'd had. And I think that's ultimately, looking back, kind of one of the biggest mistakes I've made. My whole thought process back then was, all right, let's do a graduate scheme. So I had a look around, and this is probably one of the first times where I'd really like utilized my own personal network. So my brother knew and still knows the managing director of Enterprise Rent-A-Car, put in a good word for me, and I went through the whole process as normal. But the only difference being is that when I was in the interviews, one of the chaps into and said, right, well, I guess I have to employ you now because your references come from the highest person possible within the company at this side of the pond. So had a job with Enterprise as a graduate management trainee. Just to give a bit of a summary on that, it's one of the toughest but most rewarding jobs I've ever had, and that's purely because you do so many hours in that role. I was working in a branch about 40 minutes from my house, and I had to be there for 8 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes wouldn't leave, and late into the evening, to put it that way. And your roles and responsibilities can be from anything from cleaning a car right up to collecting bad debt from clients, delivering cars and doing insurance deals on cars. But I look back and I feel like that is probably one of the most rewarding roles I've ever had.
Would you say your first role where you felt like a manager, like you had responsibility?
Yeah, because ultimately what they're trying to do is, with it being a graduate management role, they're trying to mold you into managing the branch. So the whole progression scheme is learning everything about the branch, and you have sort of profit and loss nights where you look at where the business is losing money and gaining money and what you can do in the future to help the branch become a lot more profitable. And I was fortunate that I had a manager who was, could be a bit of an idiot sometimes, but ultimately his sole aim was to make the branch the most profitable in the country. And I think we got to like number 4 at one point out of hundreds of branches. So it gave me a good insight as to how we could get there.
So you've gone from doing a lot of hours, and maybe you might have felt like you burnt yourself out. Is that what led you to go traveling for a while?
I felt like I'd learned all I wanted to learn and all I needed to learn. I didn't see myself staying in like that sort of industry my whole career. So I just felt like now was the time to pack up.
What advice could you give working in recruitment to people that are doing jobs that they don't like, or someone that wants to change career? What's kind of maybe some good advice for them?
This is a tough one for me because I'm good at giving advice, but taking it as a different proposition for me. But I would say, like, your career choices should be made on what you can see yourself doing day in and day out and what you enjoy. Like for you, it's coaching football because you've got a passion for coaching football, coaching soccer. And to me, it feels like you've made a really good career choice in that regard with what you've been doing so far. And that's probably why in hindsight I kind of regret not doing that for longer, because obviously football is a big passion of mine. However, I've been in this dilemma now for probably the best part of 5 years, where I've always thought I want to make a lot of money if I can, but I also want to have a career that I enjoy. Trying to strike that balance has been quite difficult, and I feel like I've had roles where I've always questioned like one or the other. So if I've been really enjoying a role, I've always thought, well, maybe I could make more money if I'd done this. And then I'd go into that and be like, well, I'm making okay money, but am I really enjoying it? So I think ultimately you need to find something, that you're passionate about and that you care about. Ultimately, you've got to think long term. You're going to be spending the best part of 30, 40, 50 years in potentially in that job. So just, yeah, you have to make sure it's something you care about for sure. There's also an element of like being in a job for so long, like it's almost the uncertainty of like doing something new. So if you've been working as a bus driver for 10 years, you've established relationships with everyone within the business, you know the job inside out, and then another job comes along, you're probably inclined to say no, because I think a lot of people are built with not wanting to embrace uncertainty. Humans, I think, naturally don't like uncertainty. So, and they know that the grass isn't always greener on the other side, which probably means that they're more likely just to stay in that role and be content with that. But I've got quite a controversial opinion. I think it's easy to leave school, get into a job, have a girlfriend, wife, have kids, and stay in that job. But I think for me, like, I'd rather go out and try new things, go and travel to different places. But it's all obviously always about personal preference and what comes along, and right things at the right time, of course, but each to their own. I don't begrudge any of my friends for settling down early and having kids and staying in the same job. It's always personal preference, isn't it? So
yeah, no, I agree with everything that you've said there. I mean, there's people listening to this and someone will agree, someone will disagree. And it's difficult because I can preach the exact same thing that you said and I have that same kind of outlook on life. But 2 of my best friends have children and live the life that I'm kind of talking about. So that can be that can be a difficult thing for me in regards to like, how far do I take that advice? Who do I give that advice to? And you can only say what you think, and if people want to listen and take upon what they will from that, then that's fine. I mean, all these things, all these jobs, I think you've had great experience in regards to, it doesn't matter necessarily what job that you've had, but the key skills and the lessons it has taught you is managed to not only bring you out of your shell and make you more confident and become a good manager and a good employee and hard work and all of those things that are really important to someone to be successful. It's all led you down the path of wanting to become an intelligence officer in the army. So what's made you want to do that, and why do you think that role is the best step for you next?
I just think it's more out of curiosity and everything. So I'm going down the reserve route to begin with. So I've done all the intelligence officer selection things. Like I went to a selection day in London, which was honestly the most grueling interview I've ever had. It was like 10 back-to-back 45-minute assessments based on like numeracy, literacy, IQ, your ability to work as part of a group. Yeah, some really tough tasks. And it's like, I think it tests you to the point where you're exhausted by the end of the day. With the army, you just it looks like such a good lifestyle. I've got people, friends and family that have served, who are still serving now, and I guess when you're applying for a job, you always look for the pros. Not a lot of people examine the pros and the cons, but the pros of the army for me are, maintaining physical fitness day in and day out, the responsibilities of the job. As an intelligence officer, you've got sensitive information and you're looking out for public safety and what have you, and it just to me seems like a really interesting role.
With that job, then, I don't know if you would deem it as a dream job, because I think dream jobs change, and obviously they're allowed to change throughout your life. You have different aspirations, and they can be molded and changed in different ways. Where do you see yourself? Is there like a dream role that you would love to have and you're working towards, or is there, where do you see yourself in 10 years time? Where would you like to be in 10 years time? I know that's a cliche question, but right now, where would it be?
It's a tough one. I think ultimately what I want to do is do a PhD. Now I've got the masters, I'm very much set to be able to go on and do that once I think of a good topic that I want to study. I've always been one of these people that I said about it earlier, about you have either maybe monetary gain or career fulfillment, like one side or the other. Some people are lucky enough to have both, but I think having a fulfilling career and achieving things or having goals that you want to achieve, so like the PhD, like becoming an officer, they're more so the small steps I want to achieve and look back in 10 years and say that I've done them. I don't have like an end goal as such at the moment. Going back to the variety thing as well, I've always changed my mind of what I've wanted to do, and like I'm envious of kids that have like they've grown up and have wanted to be like a fireman or something, for example, and they've gone out and done it. I was just like, I don't know how people can do it, and like, I take my hat off to them people, because I wish I had like a one defined career path that I wanted to follow.
I think if you look at a school year, so say you had year 11s, which in America it would probably be like a high grade is equivalent. You could say basically that 1% of them, maybe less than 5%, are those firemen that you speak about, where before leaving school they have an aspiration of achieving a certain job role, and then they pick a college course that allows to help them to achieve that, and then they go and achieve that, and that's their role for the next 50 years. And then I think there's a huge the other 80% maybe are people that have no idea, and then they end up falling into a job because of circumstances and people that they know. And then there's the final like 5-10%, whatever, is people like yourself, though, that I think it sounds like you have almost like a subconscious checklist in your mind of things you want to achieve in your life, and you've selected jobs, you've selected hobbies, you've selected traveling and things like that to help you achieve that checklist. And it sounds like throughout your life the checklist may be getting longer and longer, and it will become more difficult for you to keep on ticking those things off. And it's really refreshing to hear someone that is active in continuing to check off those checklists, because a lot of people have 1 out of 99 things on their checklist of things that they've achieved in their life, and it's difficult for them to then go and tick off other things.
And I think that's important, because ultimately when it's all said and done, you want to look back and and not look back with any regrets. And that's a very cliche thing to say, but it's obviously rings true for a lot of people. You know, looking back on, I think when Steve Jobs passed away a few years ago, he looked back and said all his material possessions like money, cars and everything, it didn't mean a thing, because, you know, ultimately you can drive to work, and it doesn't have to be in like a Rolls Royce. It could be in, you know, it could be in a Toyota Yaris like we were talking about earlier, and ultimately you can still get from point A to B. You don't have to live in a mansion, you can live in a flat, but ultimately what you're doing in that flat is you're sleeping and you're cooking and providing for a family. You're still doing the same things. But what I'm trying to get at here is that, like, I feel like people should have aspirations and try and look to achieve their goals, and that doesn't always have to be for monetary gain or for materialistic possessions. If that's what drives you on, then, you know, fair play.
Is there anything that you wanted to add advice wise?
It's easier said than done, but try and ignore all the negative things that are going on, and don't compare your life to anyone else's. That's a big factor for me. You know, you go on the like social media, the likes of Instagram, Facebook, and you see people that you're doing nice things, but, you know, I think an important factor is not comparing your life to anyone else's. We're all on our own paths, and we're all, you know, trying to be the best version of ourselves. So set goals and try and smash them, and don't be afraid of failure, is what I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to end the episode. Thanks for giving me time. I know you struggled to find a lot of time because of all your work and all your juggling. So I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you sharing some light on the things that you've done and some advice for people that are listening. So thank you for joining me.
No worries, mate. All the best.
You too. See you later.